The crowd gathered in the ashfall clearing like vultures circling carrion. Alara stood at its center, her wrists bound with ceremonial rope that bit into her skin with each subtle movement. Around her, the pack she had served her entire life watched with cold indifference, some with satisfaction. Alara of no bloodline, Alpha Draven's voice rang across the clearing, deep and final as a death knell. You have been judged unworthy. No wolf has claimed you. No purpose binds you to this pack. By ancient right, I sever your bond to Ashfall. The words hit her chest like physical blows. 23 years she had lived among them. 23 years of serving, healing their sick, tending their wounded, asking for nothing but a place to belong. Please. The whisper escaped before she could stop it. I have nowhere. Silence. Draven's amber eyes held nothing but disgust. An omega without a mate is a burden, a mouth that feeds but produces nothing of value. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Alara recognized faces she had once called friends, packmates whose fevers she had cooled, whose children she had helped deliver into the world. None would meet her eyes now. Draven raised his ceremonial blade, and Alara's blood turned to ice. She knew what came next. The scar. Every rejected wolf carried one, a permanent brand of shame carved into the flesh above the heart. Hold her. Two enforcers gripped her arms as Draven approached. The blade caught the dying sunlight, gleaming with cruel promise. This mark declares you outcast, Draven intoned. Packless. Worthless. Any wolf who aids you shares your shame. The first cut stole her breath. The second drew a scream she couldn't contain. By the third, Alara had stopped fighting, her body sagging between the enforcers as blood soaked through her worn dress. When it was done, Draven stepped back to admire his work. Run, little Omega. Run and pray, the wilderness claims you quickly. It would be a mercy compared to the life that awaits you. They released her. Alara crumpled to the ground, one hand pressed against the bloody wound over her heart. Through tear-blurred vision, she saw the crowd parting, creating a corridor toward the forest's dark edge. Go, someone hissed, and a stone struck her shoulder. Then another. Alara ran. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to collapse. She ran until the sounds of jeering faded into the whisper of wind through ancient pines. She ran until the familiar sense of Ashfall territory gave way to something older, wilder, forbidden, the Morven Reaches. Every pup in every pack grew up hearing the warnings. The Reaches were cursed ground, haunted by the ghosts of a kingdom that had vanished 5 centuries ago. No wolf who entered had ever returned unchanged. Most never returned at all. Alara didn't care. Death in the Reaches was still death, and death was beginning to feel like the kindest option available. The forest grew denser as she stumbled forward, the canopy so thick that twilight seemed to fall hours early. Strange sounds echoed between the trees. Not animal, not wind. Something else. Something that seemed to whisper her name. Alara. She froze, heart hammering. Who's there? Alara. This way. Madness, she told herself. Blood loss and exhaustion conjuring phantoms. But her feet moved anyway, drawn by something deeper than reason. The whisper wrapped around her like silk, pulling her through brambles and over moss-covered stones until she emerged into a clearing that stopped her breath. A stone structure rose from the earth, ancient beyond measure. It was neither building nor cave, but something in between, carved with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the fading light. At its center sat a raised platform, and upon that platform rested a great stone sarcophagus, sealed with bands of metal that glowed faintly silver. The moon seal. Something inside her recognized. The prison of the lost king. Alara approached on trembling legs. The legends spoke of this place, spoke of an alpha so powerful that the old gods themselves had feared him. They had sealed him away, the stories claimed, locked him in deathless sleep until the one who could match his soul came to wake him. Countless wolves had tried over the centuries. Warriors, alphas, shamans with ancient power. The seal had rejected them all. Alara reached the sarcophagus and stared down at the lid. The silver bands pulsed with soft light, humming with energy that made her teeth ache. Through a small window of crystal set into the stone, she could see a face. Her heart stopped. He was beautiful in the way that storms were beautiful, in the way that mountains were beautiful. Sharp features carved from pale marble, dark hair spread across the stone pillow, lips slightly parted, as if frozen mid-breath. He looked young, perhaps 30 winters, but something about him whispered of ages beyond counting. "Who were you?" Alara murmured, her fingers hovering over the crystal. The wound above her heart throbbed suddenly. Without thinking, she touched the bloody gash, and when her crimson-stained fingertips brushed the seal, a drop fell onto the ancient metal. The reaction was immediate. The silver bands flared with blinding light. The humming rose to a shriek. Alara stumbled backward, shielding her eyes as the ancient mechanism groaned and shifted for the first time in half a millennium, and then silence. When Alara lowered her arm, the lid had moved. Just an inch, a gap barely wide enough to slip her fingers through. But it had moved. Her blood had moved it. Before she could think, before wisdom could override instinct, Alara pressed her palms against the moon-sealed lid and pushed. The stone slid aside as if it weighed nothing at all, and beneath it, the Lost King's eyes snapped open, blazing molten gold that locked onto her face with the intensity of a predator sighting prey. His lips moved. A single word emerged, rough from centuries of silence, but unmistakable. Finally, Alara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Those burning eyes held her pinned more effectively than any chain, ancient and immediate all at once. The Lost King sat up slowly, his movements stiff but deliberate. Dust cascaded from his shoulders, from the dark leather armor that still clung to his frame. He was massive, she realized now. Even seated, he towered over her, broad across the chest and shoulders in a way that spoke of violence contained. "You." His voice was a rasp, cracked from disuse. He cleared his throat and tried again. "You opened it." Alara's legs finally remembered how to move. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a root. "I didn't mean to. The blood, it was an accident." Something flickered across his face. Amusement, perhaps, or disbelief. "An accident." He repeated the word like he was tasting it. "5 centuries I have waited for the one whose blood could break the seal. And she calls it an accident. 5 centuries. The number rang in Alara's skull. The legends were true. This creature before her had been sleeping since before her grandmother's grandmother had drawn breath. "I should go." The words tumbled out. "I shouldn't be here. This place is forbidden." "Wait." The command resonated with power that pressed against her chest, that made her wolf her weak. Omega Wolf want to drop to its knees in submission, but beneath the authority was something else. Something almost like desperation. "Please," he added, and the words seemed to cost him. "Do not flee. Not yet." Alara hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to run, but she had been running all day, and she was so very tired. "Who are you?" The Lost King swung his legs over the edge of the sarcophagus, moving like a man testing limbs he wasn't certain still functioned. "I am Kaelin, once Alpha of the Silvervale Kingdom." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Now, it seems, I am a relic." "Silvervale fell," Alara said softly. "Centuries ago. The histories say a great war. The histories lie." His amber gaze found hers again. "There was no war. There was betrayal. My own counsel, my own blood, conspired with the shamans to seal me away. They feared what I was becoming, what I could do." He paused, studying her face with unnerving intensity. "But that is a tale for another moment. First, tell me your name." "Alara. Alara." He spoke it slowly, reverently, as if committing it to memory. "And why does Alara wander the cursed reaches alone, bleeding from a wound that smells of pack justice?" Her hand flew instinctively to her chest, to the cuts that still seeped beneath her ruined dress. She had forgotten somehow. The pain had faded to a dull throb beneath the weight of everything else. "I was cast out," she admitted, the shame burning fresh. "Rejected. I am Omega, and no wolf wanted to claim me, so they marked you." His voice had gone dangerously quiet. "They carved their cruelty into your skin and sent you to die. It is the old way, the law." Kaelin rose to his full height, and Alara's breath caught. He was taller than any alpha she had ever seen, his presence filling the ancient chamber like smoke filling a room. When he stepped toward her, she should have fled. Every rational thought demanded it. Instead, she stood frozen as he closed the distance between them. "May I see?" The question was soft, at odds with the power radiating from his form. Alara found herself nodding before she could think, her fingers moving to pull aside the torn fabric of her collar. The wound was ugly, 3 jagged cuts forming the rune of rejection. still raw and weeping. Kaelin studied it with an expression she couldn't read, his jaw tightening until she could see the muscle flex beneath his skin. Barbaric, he murmured. Even in my time, we did not treat Omegas thus. They were cherished, protected. Some even carried gifts that allowed them to shift when the need was great enough. It doesn't matter. Alara let the fabric fall back. I have no pack now. No home. When you release me, I'll continue into the reaches until... Until what? His eyes flared bright. Until exposure claims you? Until some beast finds you wounded and weak? He shook his head slowly. I did not wait across centuries for my fated one, only to watch her walk to her death. Alara's heart stuttered. Your what? Kaelin raised one hand, his fingers hovering beside her face without quite touching. This close, she could see the flecks of amber within the gold of his irises, could smell the ancient power that clung to him like wood smoke. Do you not feel it? He asked quietly. The pull? The recognition. My wolf has known your face since before your great-grandmothers were born. I dreamed of you, Alara. Every year of my imprisonment, your face was my only light. That's impossible. Is it? His fingers finally brushed her cheek, and electricity arced through her entire body. Her wolf, dormant and broken, suddenly surged to life with a howl of recognition that echoed through her bones. Kaelin's eyes widened slightly. You feel it. She did. Goddess help her. She felt it, a spark of connection, sharp and undeniable. But even as she reached for it, the sensation slipped away, leaving only the echo of what should have been. This cannot be, she whispered. I am no one. I am less than no one. And you are... yours. The word was fierce, absolute. I am yours, Alara, as you are mine. The seal could only be broken by my true mate's blood. The shamans thought they were condemning me to eternal sleep. His lips curved into something between a smile and a snarl. They never imagined she would actually come. Before Alara could respond, Kaelin's eyes rolled back, and his great body swayed. She caught him instinctively, staggering under his weight as centuries of frozen sleep finally claimed their toll. Kaelin? Kaelin! He was unconscious, his breath shallow, and his skin ice-cold beneath her palms. And Alara, rejected Omega with nowhere to go and no one to help her, realized she had a choice to make. She looked toward the dark forest, toward the death that waited there. Then she looked down at the fallen king in her arms, this impossible man who claimed she was his destiny. Foolish, she muttered to herself as she began to drag him toward the shelter of the stone chamber. This is foolish and hopeless and probably a fever dream. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Something inside her wouldn't let him go. The night passed in fitful intervals of consciousness. Alara worked by the thin moonlight that filtered through cracks in the ancient stone, using what little knowledge she possessed to tend to Kaelin's strange condition. He wasn't injured, not exactly, but centuries of magical sleep had left his body struggling to remember how to function. His heartbeat was erratic, his temperature swinging between burning fever and deathly chill. Twice she thought she had lost him. Twice his chest rose again with shuddering breath. Stubborn king, she whispered, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. Too stubborn to die properly, aren't you? His lips twitched, and for a moment she could have sworn he was smiling. By dawn, his condition had stabilized. Alara sat with her back against the sarcophagus, exhausted beyond measure but unwilling to sleep. Her own wound throbbed with each heartbeat, the rejection mark burning as if freshly carved. My fated one, he had called her. My true mate. The words echoed through her mind, impossible to believe but equally impossible to forget. She had felt something when he touched her, a flash of connection, bright and fierce. But it had faded so quickly, leaving her wondering if she had imagined it entirely. You're staring. Alara jumped. Kaelin's eyes were open, clearer now than they had been before. The gold had softened to warm amber, though no less intense. I was watching for signs of distress, she said quickly. You were quite ill, and you tended me through the night. It wasn't a question. He turned his head slowly, taking in the makeshift camp she had created, the torn strips of her underskirt she had used to pillow his head. Why? I don't know. The honesty surprised her. I should have left. You're a stranger, a king from a dead era. I owe you nothing. Yet you stayed. Yet I stayed. Kaelin pushed himself up onto his elbows, grimacing at the effort. The bond, he said quietly, even incomplete, even fighting to take hold, It pulls at your wolf. I felt something, Alara admitted, hugging her knees to her chest. When you touched my face, like lightning, but then it was gone. The spark needs kindling. His voice was rough with emotion. The bond is trying to form, but something blocks it. Perhaps your wolf has been wounded too deeply to trust. They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers bound by something neither fully understood. You need food, Alara said finally. Water. I saw a stream, not far from here. If you can manage alone for a short while, come here first. The command was gentle but undeniable. Alara found herself moving before she consciously chose to, settling beside him close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Your wound, Kaelin said. Let me see it again. It's fine. Alara. Just her name. Nothing more, but spoken with such quiet authority that her protests died in her throat. She pulled aside her collar, revealing the ugly mark. In the pale morning light, it looked even worse than before, the edges inflamed and angry. Kaelin's expression darkened. This will scar. That's the point. She tried to keep her voice light. So everyone knows what I am, what I'm worth. You are worth more than every wolf who stood in that clearing. His hand rose to hover over the wound, not touching but close enough that she could feel warmth emanating from his palm. They are blind, weak, unworthy of the gift they discarded. Pretty words for a woman you've known less than a day. I have known you across centuries of dreaming. His amber eyes met hers, fierce and certain. I knew you before you existed, Alara, and I know this. His hand moved higher, cupping her unmarked cheek with devastating gentleness. You are not what they named you. You are not rejected. You are not worthless. You are the woman who walked through cursed lands and woke a king. You are my mate, my equal, my heart. Tears spilled down Alara's cheeks before she could stop them. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her as if she mattered. You don't know me, she whispered. Not truly. What if I disappoint you? Impossible. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. You surpassed my dreams the moment you chose to stay. Alara didn't know who moved first. Perhaps they moved together, drawn by the invisible thread that bound them. But suddenly his forehead rested against hers, their breath mingling, and she felt her wolf rising to meet his with a recognition that transcended logic. I need to mark you, Kaelin breathed. My wolf demands it. The bond demands it. But I will not take what is not freely given. Tell me to stop, and I will. She should tell him to stop. She knew nothing about him beyond legend, and a single night of strange connection. This was madness. But Alara was so tired of being sensible, so tired of following rules that had brought her nothing but pain. Yes, she whispered. Kaelin made a sound low in his chest, something between a groan and a growl. His lips found her throat, tracing a path of fire along her pulse. When he reached the spot where her neck met her shoulder, he paused. This will bind us, he murmured against her skin. Incomplete until you mark me in return, but binding nonetheless. Are you certain? Yes. His teeth sank into her flesh. Pain exploded through Alara's body, sharp and searing. She cried out, her hands flying to grip his shoulders. But before she could push him away, the pain transformed. It became heat. It became light. It became a flood of sensation so overwhelming that her vision went white. She felt him, not just his teeth in her skin, but his essence pouring into her through the wound. His loneliness, his centuries of darkness, his desperate hope each time he dreamed her face. And beneath it all, she felt his wolf recognizing hers, reaching for her broken spirit like a shield, like a promise. Mine, his wolf declared. Yours, her wolf answered. And for the first time in her life, she meant it. But even as the words echoed through her soul, she felt the connection slipping away. His essence poured into her, but it found no anchor. Like water through sand, it drained into emptiness. When Kaelin finally released her, Alara collapsed against him, trembling in the aftermath. His arms came around her instantly, cradling her against his chest. My heart, he whispered into her hair. My brave, beautiful heart. Alara tried to respond, but darkness was already claiming her. The wound on her neck pulsed with strange warmth, and she could feel something stirring inside her, something that should have been awakening but instead remained frustratingly dormant. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness took her was Kaelin's voice, tight with sudden alarm. Alara? Alara? Then nothing. Alara woke to the sound of her own screaming. Pain lanced through her body in waves, starting from the bite on her neck and radiating outward until every nerve felt like it was being stripped raw. She thrashed against the stone floor, her back arching, her fingers clawing at nothing. Alara, Alara, look at me. Kalen's face swam into view above her, his eyes wide with fear. His hands gripped her shoulders, trying to hold her still, but her body refused to obey. What's happening? She gasped between spasms. What did you do to me? The bond. His voice was ragged. Your body is trying to accept it, but something is fighting back. Something inside you. Another wave of agony crashed through her. Through the haze of pain, she felt something stirring deep within her chest. Not the bond. Something older. Something she had buried so deep she had almost forgotten it existed. No, she thought desperately. Not that. Anything but that. But the power didn't care about her fear. It rose like a tide, responding to the threat against her body. Golden light began to seep from her pores, soft at first, then blazing. Kalen released her with a sharp intake of breath. What? What is this? Alara couldn't answer. The light was consuming her now, pouring from her hands, her eyes, the wound on her neck. But instead of completing the bond, it wrapped around the forming connection and pushed it away, protecting her from something her buried instincts perceived as invasion. Stop, she begged silently. Please stop. He'll see. He'll know. The light reached its crescendo, blinding in the dim chamber, and then it collapsed. Inward. Alara went limp, gasping for breath, the taste of copper on her tongue. Silence filled the space between them. You're a healer. Kalen's voice was barely above a whisper. A true healer, blessed by the old light. Alara squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the disgust, the fear. In the modern packs, wolves with the old gifts were considered abominations. Draven had suspected, once. It was part of why he had hated her so thoroughly. Look at me. She couldn't. Wouldn't. Alara. His hand cupped her cheek, gentle despite the command in his tone. Look at me. She opened her eyes to find him staring at her with something that looked terrifyingly like wonder. In my time, he said slowly, healers were sacred, protected above all others. They were the bridge between wolves and the divine. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You carry the rarest gift our kind has ever known, and they cast you out for it? They don't know. Her voice cracked. I've hidden it since I was a child. My mother warned me before she died. She said the new packs fear what they don't understand. So I learned to suppress it, to keep it buried so deep that even I forgot its true strength. Understanding dawned in Kalen's expression. That's why the bond won't complete. Your gift is so deeply hidden that it's blocking the connection, protecting you from something it doesn't recognize as safe. Then they are fools for driving you to such lengths. Kalen's expression hardened. And I will make them regret every moment of pain they caused you. Before Alara could argue, a sound from outside the chamber made them both freeze. Footsteps. Multiple sets, moving through the forest with the quiet efficiency of trained hunters. Someone's coming, Alara breathed. Kalen was on his feet instantly, his body shifting into a protective stance between her and the entrance. Stay behind me, he commanded. You're barely recovered. You can't fight. Watch me. The footsteps stopped just outside. Alara's heart hammered as shadows fell across the chamber's entrance. Then a voice called out, achingly familiar, and filled with vicious satisfaction. Well, the little reject survived after all. Draven. He stepped into the chamber flanked by 6 of his strongest enforcers, his amber eyes taking in the scene with cold calculation. When his gaze landed on Kalen, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Fear. And then, carefully masked, greed. And she found the lost king. Draven smiled, showing too many teeth. How fortunate. The council will be very interested to hear about this. The enforcers fanned out, surrounding them in a half circle that left no avenue for escape. Alara's mind raced. The council. She had heard whispers of them, the secret rulers who controlled all the packs from the shadows. If Draven reported Kalen's awakening to them. You followed me, she said, stalling for time. Into the reaches. You risked cursed ground just to make sure I died? Don't. Flatter yourself. Draven's eyes never left Kalen. We've had scouts watching this place for generations. Imagine my surprise when the seals began to glow last night. He studied Kalen like a merchant appraising goods. The council has been trying to open that sarcophagus for 300 years, and a worthless Omega succeeds where our greatest shamans failed? She is not worthless. Kalen's voice was quiet, but it filled the chamber like thunder. She is my mate, my queen, and you will address her with respect. Draven laughed. Your mate? You've been asleep for 5 centuries. You have no idea what she is. The only mistake, Kalen said, was yours, marking her, casting her out, driving her to me. Something shifted in the air. Alara felt it before she saw it. The temperature dropping, the shadows deepening. Kalen's eyes began to glow brighter, and when he spoke again, his voice carried harmonics that weren't entirely human. I remember your bloodline, Draven of Ashfall. Your ancestors served mine. They knelt before my throne and swore oaths of eternal loyalty. He smiled, and it was terrifying. Shall I remind you what happens to oathbreakers? Genuine fear crossed Draven's face. He took an involuntary step backward before catching himself. Seize them, he barked at his enforcers. Both of them. The council will decide. Kalen moved. One moment he stood beside Alara. The next, he was among the enforcers like a wolf among sheep. Within seconds, 4 enforcers lay groaning on the ground, and the remaining 2 had fled into the forest. Draven stood alone, his face pale. Impossible, he whispered. You should be weak. The sleep should have what? Kalen advanced slowly. Diminished me? He stopped inches from Draven's face. I am Kalen of Silvervale, Alpha of the First Blood, and you. He gripped Draven's throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. You hurt what is mine, Kalen. Alara's voice cut through the violence. Don't. He turned to look at her, surprise flickering through the predatory focus. He deserves death, Kalen said, for what he did to you. Maybe. Alara moved closer, her hand finding his arm. But if you kill him, the council will hunt us both. We need to disappear, not start a war. For a long moment, Kalen didn't move. The struggle was visible on his face. Vengeance warring with reason. Finally, with a sound of pure frustration, he dropped Draven to the ground. Run back to your masters, he snarled. Tell them the lost king has risen. And tell them this. Ilara is mine. If anyone touches her again, I will end their bloodline so thoroughly that even the histories will forget they existed. Draven scrambled to his feet and fled without looking back. Kalen turned to Alara, his expression softening instantly. We need to move. He'll return with reinforcements. Where can we go? There is a place. He took her hand, his grip warm and certain. An old sanctuary, hidden from the world, since before my imprisonment. If it still stands, we'll be safe there. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Kalen lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. So am I. But I would rather face fear with you than face eternity without you. They ran together into the forest, leaving the past behind. But as the trees closed around them, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The bite on her neck had begun to pulse again, not with pain but with a strange, hollow ache. And deep inside her chest, where the bond should have been taking root, she felt only emptiness. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of running, of hiding, of sleeping in caves and abandoned ruins while Draven's hunters combed the wilderness for them. 3 weeks of Kalen teaching her the old paths through the reaches, the secret ways that had been forgotten by the modern packs. 3 weeks of the ache in her chest growing worse. Alara hid it as best she could. She smiled when Kalen looked at her with those warm eyes full of hope. She laughed at his wonder over simple things. Fire strikers, preserved foods, the strange new words that had entered the common tongue during his long sleep. She let him hold her at night, his body curved protectively around hers, and pretended that his warmth was enough to fill the void inside her. But the dreams told a different story. Every night, she found herself in a landscape of silver mist and endless winter. She would walk through the cold, searching for something she couldn't name, while a voice echoed around her. Incomplete. 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 She would wake gasping, her hand pressed to the bite mark that had never fully healed, and find Kalen watching her with growing concern. The nightmares are getting worse, he said one morning as they sheltered in an ancient watchtower. I feel your distress through the bond. Your fear. It's nothing. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Just dreams. Alara. He caught her chin gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. Do you think I cannot tell when you're hiding something from me?" She wanted to tell him, but how could she explain that his mark, his precious bond, was slowly killing her? Before she could decide, a sound from below made them both freeze. Voices, not the rough calls of Draven's hunters, but something more refined, more dangerous. "They've been spotted in this sector," someone said. "The council wants them alive, both of them. The king especially," another voice replied. "They say his blood holds the key to something the ancestors hid away." Kalen's expression went cold. "The right of dominion," he breathed. "They're trying to resurrect it." "What is that?" Alara whispered. "A ritual from the old times. It allows one alpha to consume another's power." His jaw tightened. "It was forbidden even in my era. The cost was too high." "What cost?" "The sacrifice of a bonded mate." His eyes met hers, and she saw the horror there. "They want my blood, Alara. But they need you to complete the ritual." A healer of the old light bonded to an alpha of the first blood. Together, we're the key to unlimited power. The void in Alara's chest pulsed with sudden, vicious pain. She gasped, doubling over, and Kalen caught her instantly. "What is it? What's wrong?" "The bond," she finally admitted, the words torn from her against her will. "Something's wrong with it. Ever since you marked me, I've felt empty, like there's a hole where the connection should be." Kalen's face went pale. "That's impossible. I felt the bond form. I feel you right now." "You feel me, but I can't feel you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Your mark is in my skin, but it's not reaching my soul. And every day, the emptiness grows. Every day, I feel myself fading." "No." The word was fierce, desperate. "I didn't wait across centuries of darkness just to lose you." Kalen pulled her against his chest, his arms tight around her as if he could physically hold her together. "The sanctuary. There are records there, ancient texts that predate even me. If an answer exists, we'll find it there." He pressed his lips to her forehead. "I will not let you die, Alara. I refuse." Below them, the council's agents were moving closer. "Can we escape?" Alara asked. "Not both of us. I'm too weak from the incomplete bond." He gripped her shoulders. "You have to go alone. Follow the northern ridge until you reach a waterfall that flows upward. Behind it is the entrance to the sanctuary. I won't leave you. You must." His eyes blazed with intensity. "If they capture me, I can survive. But you," his voice cracked, "you're dying. The sanctuary is your only chance. Kalen, go." He kissed her, hard and desperate and full of everything they hadn't had time to say. "Find the cure. Come back to me." Kalen shoved her toward the hidden passage behind the watchtower's hearth, his body already turning to face the door. "I love you," Alara whispered. "I know." His smile was sad and fierce all at once. "I've loved you across lifetimes. A few more weeks won't break me." The door burst open. Alara ran. Behind her, she heard the sounds of combat, heard Kalen's roar as he bought her precious seconds. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs screamed for mercy. And inside her chest, the void grew larger, hungrier, colder, incomplete, the voice whispered in her mind. Incomplete, and running out of time, the waterfall flowed upward. Alara stood before it 3 days later, gasping for breath, her body trembling with exhaustion and the ever-present cold that had settled into her bones. She was dying. She could feel it now with crystalline clarity. Her gift, the power that had always hummed beneath her skin, was flickering like a candle in a storm. Soon it would go out entirely, and she would follow, but not yet. Not until she found answers. Alara stepped through the impossible waterfall and emerged into a cavern of breathtaking beauty. Crystals lined the walls, pulsing with soft blue light. Ancient carvings covered every surface, depicting wolves and moons and figures that seemed to blur between human and beast. At the cavern's heart stood an altar, and upon that altar rested a tome bound in silver leather. The Chronicle of Bonds. A voice whispered in her mind. "You have come at last, child of light." Alara approached on unsteady legs, her fingers trembling as she opened the ancient book. The pages were filled with script she shouldn't have been able to read, yet the words flowed into her mind as easily as water. She read of the first wolves, blessed by the moon goddess herself. She read of the bonds that tied mates together, soul to soul, across lifetimes and centuries. She read of the alpha kings of the first blood, whose power was so great that only a mate of equal strength could survive their claiming. And then she found the passage that stopped her heart. When an alpha of the first blood marks a mate whose power lies suppressed, the bond cannot complete. The alpha's essence will pour endlessly into the void where the mate's power should reside, draining both until death claims them. There is only one cure. The suppressed mate must fully awaken their gift and return the claiming bite. Only then can the bond find balance. Only then can both survive. Alara's hand flew to the mark on her neck. She had known her gift was hidden, dampened by years of fear, but she hadn't realized how completely she had crippled herself. "You have buried your light so deep it cannot answer the bond," the voice confirmed. "Your power responds only to threats, not to love. Until you choose to burn brightly by choice rather than instinct, the bond will remain broken." "How do I awaken it fully?" she asked the empty cavern. "How do I save him?" "You must choose to be seen, to be known, to be vulnerable. You must burn so brightly that nothing can deny what you are." Before she could pursue the thought, a new vision slammed into her mind. She saw Kaelin in chains, bound to a stone altar surrounded by hooded figures. She saw them carving symbols into his flesh while he refused to scream. She saw a ceremonial blade being raised above his heart. "The right of dominion begins at moonrise," the voice said urgently. "If you do not reach him before the blade falls, he will die, and you will follow." Where? Where are they holding him? The obsidian spire, the council's seat of power. 3 hours run for a wolf at full strength. 3 hours. Alara could barely stand upright. Her power was guttering, her body failing, and the distance was impossible. But Kaelin was going to die believing she had abandoned him. That was unacceptable. Alara closed her eyes and reached deep within herself, past the fear, past the doubt, past 23 years of believing she was nothing. She reached for the light that had always been there, waiting for her to stop being afraid. "I am not worthless," she told herself fiercely. "I am blessed with the old light. I am the maid of a king. I am the woman who opened a seal that held for 5 centuries, and I will not let him die." The light answered. It exploded from her core like a sun being born, blazing through her veins, burning away the void that had been consuming her. The pain was extraordinary, every cell in her body screaming, as suppressed power finally, fully awakened. But beneath the pain was something else. Strength, purpose, love so fierce it could move mountains. When Alara opened her eyes, they blazed pure gold. She ran. The obsidian spire rose from the earth like a blade of black glass, its peak scraping the belly of the blood-red moon. As she crested the final ridge and saw the fortress below, her heart plummeted. Hundreds of wolves surrounded the spire, council enforcers in ceremonial armor. The main gates stood open, revealing a courtyard filled with hooded figures, arranged in concentric circles around a raised platform. And on that platform, Kaelin knelt in chains. Even from this distance, Alara could see the silver burns on his wrists where the restraints touched his skin, could see the blood dripping from dozens of ritual cuts carved into his chest, could see the way he held his head high despite everything, refusing to show weakness before his enemies. A figure in elaborate robes stood before him, holding a curved blade that gleamed with dark enchantment. "Kaelin of Silver Vale," the figure intoned, "you have been judged by the Council of Pax. Your bloodline is too dangerous to persist. Your power will be harvested for the good of all wolfkind. The good of your own ambition, you mean?" Kaelin's voice was rough but defiant. "My ancestors would weep to see what the Pax have become. Your ancestors are dust." The robed figure raised the blade. "As you will be, once we complete the rite. Your mate has fled. Your bond is incomplete. There is no one left to save you." Kaelin's laugh was broken and beautiful. "You think I need saving?" He lifted his head, and even in chains, even bleeding and defeated, he looked like a king. "I have lived across centuries dreaming of a woman who didn't exist yet. I woke to find her more magnificent than any dream. I have known true love, even if only for a moment." His voice softened. "Alara gave me more in 3 weeks than I experienced in centuries of rule. If I die tonight, I die grateful. I die complete." No, the word blazed through Alara's mind with the force of a thunderclap. She would not let this happen. She would not let him die, believing their love was a beautiful tragedy instead of an eternal triumph. She had spent her entire life concealing herself, running, accepting the judgment of wolves who couldn't see her worth. No more. Alara threw back her head and howled. The sound that emerged was not the weak cry of a rejected Omega. It was the roar of awakened power, of light made manifest, of a woman finally claiming everything she had been too afraid to embrace. The howl echoed across the valley, shaking the obsidian spire to its foundations. Every wolf in the courtyard froze, and then Alara began to transform. She had never shifted before. Omegas rarely could, their wolf spirits too diminished to take physical form. But Kaelin had spoken of the old ways, of Omegas whose gifts allowed them to shift when the need was great enough. She understood now. This was what he had meant. The shift was agony and ecstasy intertwined. Her bones cracked and reformed. Her muscles tore and rebuilt themselves stronger. Fur the color of moonlight erupted across her skin, and when the transformation completed, a wolf of pure silver stood where Alara had been. She was magnificent. She was terrifying. She was coming for her mate. Alara launched herself down the ridge, a streak of silver lightning cutting through the darkness. The enforcers who tried to stop her were thrown aside like leaves in a hurricane. Her newly awakened power blazed around her, and wolves scattered before her advance. "Impossible!" the robed figure screamed. "She's an Omega! She can't—" But Alara wasn't listening. She had eyes only for Kaelin, who stared at her approaching form with an expression of stunned wonder. She leaped. The distance was impossible. The height was absurd. But love doesn't care about physics, and Alara soared through the air like she had wings. She landed on the platform in a shower of golden sparks, her massive silver form placing itself between Kaelin and the ceremonial blade. "Mine," she growled, and the word carried power that made the platform crack beneath her paws. The robed figure stumbled backward. "Kill her! Kill them both!" Enforcers surged forward, but Alara was already moving. She shifted back to human form in the space between heartbeats, her hands finding Kaelin's face, her eyes meeting his. "You came," he whispered, tears cutting tracks through the blood on his cheeks. "I stopped being afraid." She pressed her forehead to his. "I chose to be seen, and I am never letting you go again." "The bond," he gasped. "It's still incomplete. You'll die if—" "No." Alara smiled, and it was the most radiant thing he had ever seen. "I know what I have to do." She kissed him, deep and fierce and full of centuries of waiting, 3 weeks of running, and a lifetime of finally understanding her own worth. And then she bit him. Her teeth found the place where his neck met his shoulder, the sacred spot that would complete what he had started. She bit down with supernatural strength, and as her teeth pierced his skin, the world exploded. The incomplete bond ignited like dry kindling touched by flame. She felt him flooding into her, his centuries of loneliness, his desperate hope each time he dreamed her face, his fierce and overwhelming love for the woman who had opened his prison. And he felt her in return. The years of rejection, the buried power, the moment she had chosen courage over fear. Their souls crashed together and merged, two halves finally becoming whole. Light erupted from where their bodies connected, golden and silver intertwined, so bright that every wolf in the courtyard was forced to look away. The chains binding Kaelin shattered. The ritual circle cracked and crumbled. When the light finally faded, Alara and Kaelin stood in the center of the ruined platform, their arms wrapped around each other, their matching marks glowing softly in the moonlight. The bond was complete. "My queen," Kaelin breathed, his eyes shining with tears and joy. "My heart, my home, my king," Alara answered, and the words felt like truth, like destiny. Around them, the remaining council members fled into the night, their schemes shattered. Draven was among them, Alara noted with distant satisfaction. Let him spend the rest of his life knowing that the Omega he had rejected had become more powerful than he could ever dream. The scar over her heart, the mark of her rejection, began to warm. Alara looked down to see golden light seeping from the wound, burning away the ugly brand until only smooth skin remained. "It's gone," she whispered. "You were never truly rejected," Kaelin said softly. "You were being saved. For me. For this moment. For the rest of our eternity." Alara laughed, the sound bright and free and full of more joy than she had ever thought possible. She had walked into the cursed reaches expecting to die. Instead, she had found a king who had waited across centuries for her touch. She had found power she never knew she possessed. She had found belonging in the arms of a man who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. "What happens now?" she asked. Kaelin smiled, and it transformed his face from fierce to beautiful. Now we rebuild. The old kingdom rises again, led by a king and queen who will never let another wolf suffer as you did. He cupped her face in his hands. Now we live, Alara, together, forever. He kissed her beneath the blood-red moon, surrounded by the ruins of their enemies' ambitions, and Alara finally understood what the voice in the sanctuary had meant. She had chosen to be seen, and in being seen, she had found everything she never dared to dream of. She was finally where she belonged. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you'd like to hear more tales of fated mates, forbidden love, and second chances, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means the world to me.